Today for Devotions with Daniella, we are reading Generation Hope, How Inclusive Economics Can Help Us All Thrive. This is a book that I'm reading a little bit at a time from my own process of deconstructing all the bad stuff I was taught. And if you are interested, you can get a copy here. This is a chapter powered by the people. The late 2000s saw the emergence of the sharing economy, defined as an economic system in which personal assets like a car, house, etc., are shared between private individuals, either freely or for a fee, typically by means of the internet. When it first started, it was much more personal than it is now. When it was small, it felt like more than a transaction. Guests would live with their hosts in their spare bedroom or even a couch in the living room, and often get more than just accommodation. Relationships were built and real cultural exchanges took place. Hosts could differentiate themselves with their personality. But as the industry grew, all that changed. Now the majority of hosts typically do not live in the same property as their guests. As the platforms became bigger, they attracted different clientele too. These visitors wanted to be left alone. For families going on holiday, renting an entire home rather than staying at a hotel or a resort is a different, often preferable vibe. Smartphones enabled this kind of networking at an unprecedented level, and the idea of earning extra cash from your possessions when you aren't using them quickly caught on. Platforms like Uber and Airbnb provided the first opportunities that, at the beginning, benefited people on both sides of the trade. People began renting out spare rooms or using their car to make extra income on the side. Workers who commuted into cities would pick people up on their way to their day job, then turn on their Uber app to drive people back in the evening. But even as individuals answered the call to share their resources, the platforms that enabled sharing couldn't sustain themselves, as defined by giantism, purely on side hustles. They needed to be more reliable, which required people who could work full-time. To work full-time, people began leasing cars, renting homes, and driving with the hope of making a living, rather than getting better utility from assets they already owned. Strategist Louisa Heinrich wrote about this phenomenon in a 2015 post she titled Sharing Schmaring. She said this, my comment in brackets, "Most of the businesses lumped together underneath the sharing economy moniker have nothing to do with sharing. Sharing is free. Sharing is non-commercial. Sharing might stretch to collective ownership or swapping used goods, but it definitely doesn't mean profit, especially when the profits aren't shared with the gig workers. When we tell our kids to share their toys, we're not telling them to charge Jimmy by the hour to play with their Lego. Whereas Airbnb, Relay Rides, TaskRabbit et al. Are very commercial indeed. Labeling them with the word sharing misses the critical point that these businesses are proving. Humans like to do business with other humans." As with so many other industries, it soon became apparent that the very people who helped build these platforms to astonishingly high valuations, often in the tens of billions, were being squeezed. Uber became the largest taxi company that doesn't own a single taxi. Without people to drive their personal cars, the business itself wouldn't exist, much less at the level it does now. Valued at $112 billion in April 2021, they have fought tooth and nail to classify their drivers as partners and not employees. I'm not saying their drivers should be employees, but what I am saying is that their drivers should partake in the company's overall wealth creation, given they are such a key success factor. Plenty of reports also cited anecdotal evidence these platforms are improving financial health for gig workers, touting them as a success story, and legitimizing questionable practices. It's easy to find 3 or 5 stories of gig workers who are grateful. They have an income when they previously didn't, while some are able to supplement existing income or earn money while defining their own hours. Some have cars for the first time in their life, and they can use them for their family when not working. Though it should be noted that this benefit contradicts the origin of the so-called sharing economy. There are, of course, wild success stories where some early drivers made so much money that they now have a fleet of cars on the platform with other drivers driving for them, much like a pyramid scheme, where those who get in early earn from the efforts of those who get in later. Gig workers report a feeling of independence that comes from not having to report to a manager the way they had to at other jobs. One driver told me that if he felt tired, he could switch off the app and have a nap and nobody would question him. But these platforms have other ways of getting their so-called partners to stay on the platform. They run promotions or challenges that incentivize more working hours. An example, 50 trips in 3 days gives you a cash bonus over and above the money you make for those trips and customer tips. For every success story, however, there are plenty others about how much gig workers struggle under financial pressure, trying to make ends meet. Some share a car with another driver, each driving for 12 hours so that the car is fully utilized. But when the car breaks down, both of them temporarily lose their income and have to foot the bill to fix the car. Others drive for up to 16 hours a day and sleep in their cars on the off hours. Platforms are cracking down on this, but not very effectively, as drivers can work for multiple platforms. When the pandemic hit, I was venture building for Catalyst Fund, a startup accelerator that helped inclusive fintech startups reach product market fit. The startup we were helping was providing microloans to gig workers. The first step in this process is to validate the product offering. So a colleague and I began doing user research through interviews with gig workers in India to understand their financial lives, so they would be better served with the financial products from a range of different delivery platforms. We spoke to Uber drivers, food bicycle delivery riders, and grocery delivery riders. For these people, gig work wasn't a side hustle. It was their full-time job. Two stories really stuck with me. The first came from April 2020, when India was in a strict lockdown. All restaurants were closed and ride-sharing companies went with them. Hari had only been working with an online supermarket for 2 years. Like Hari, the only gig workers who still had work were grocery delivery workers, and those platforms were hiring, lapping up lucky workers who could step into new openings. Hari explained to us that demand for those gigs skyrocketed alongside two things. The grocery delivery platforms reduced commissions by 20%, and the basket size of each order increased due to people buying more than just one-off items via delivery. That left delivery riders like Hari carrying big bulky bags of groceries on their bikes while being paid less. What's more, now that there were more riders on the platform, each gig worker got fewer trips, a theme we kept hearing as we spoke to more and more gig workers. Hari grew frustrated and eventually quit his job, moving back to his village. The second man, let's call him Raman, was married with 2 kids, aged 1 and 2 years old. He lived 20 kilometers away from the Indian city of Hyderabad. To save time and cost of fuel, he lived in a hostel for 6 days a week, going home just 1 day a week. For the year prior, his father had been handicapped. 1 hand and leg were paralyzed. While his mother took care of his father, Raman and his brothers paid for his father's medical expenses, making them the 2 income earners in the family. While his small salary stipend stayed the same during the pandemic, his main source of income, the commission he received based on deliveries, was reduced as he went from 70 plus deliveries per day to fewer than 30. He had no savings, and whatever he was able to learn went toward meeting basic needs. He was unable to take his father to large hospitals, which had what he needed but were too expensive. The truth that we uncovered in our interviews was that gig working platforms are, and always were, a race to the bottom. The danger in this scenario is that the supply side is free for the platform. A gig worker only earns when they are on a gig rather than being paid a fixed salary regardless of whether there is enough work for them. Gig workers absorb their own costs, the time of waiting, driving to pick up a passenger, and vehicle maintenance, and they only get paid from the time they pick up a customer until they drop them off. This means the platform can have an oversupply of gig workers without an additional cost. In fact, that's a good thing for platforms because it means the customer is even more likely to get a cab in 2 minutes or less. If workers were paid appropriately for their time, platforms would have to manage how many workers they had on their platform at a given time to balance it with the demand from customers. Gig workers would earn a fairer wage, but wait times would go up for the customers. So the platforms got smart. And meanwhile, the algorithm prioritizes new joiners with the objective of hooking them. Almost universally, workers are left working longer hours to make the money they used to make, while founders, investors, and corporate employees make outsized returns. check out Generation Hope.